So for this project, I only picked up 2 different items that you're gonna need. So I was already at Target, but you can choose to get your supplies at a craft store. So I did just go to Target and I picked up an organic sheet set. So I just like the idea of knowing that the fabric I was going to be using is organic, but you could also just go to the craft store and pick up yards of fabric. You could use any color, any kind of fabric that you want. I just chose organic cotton. And then also, since I was at Target, for the stuffing, I just picked up this Ease pillow. I'm just gonna be using the stuffing out of this. It's hypoallergenic, but you can also use whatever stuffing you want. If you wanna find organic cotton stuffing or whatever you wanna use is fine. I was just at Target and decided to get this. And then the only other things you'll need is a measuring tape, a sewing machine, and a needle and thread. To get started, I'm just gonna take out my fabric that I'm gonna be using, and I'm just gonna measure the dimensions that we're gonna use for the lounger. So I think this came with a fitted sheet and a flat sheet, so I'm definitely gonna be using the flat sheet. It's just gonna make my life easier. So take whatever fabric that you decided to get and just fold it in half. So the dimensions for this lounger, it's gonna be roughly about 27 inches in length and 17 inches in width. So this is gonna fit a baby 0 to 6 or 7 months. So I'm going to be measuring from, this is the creased side, so this is where I folded over the fabric. I'm just gonna measure that into the length of the lounger so it cuts down some sewing time. I won't have to sew that side. So first I'm gonna take my side and I'm going to measure to 20 inches. This is gonna give me extra space to sew the seam, and when we fill it, it's gonna roughly be about 17 to 18 inches. I'm just gonna not use a marker to mark this because this fabric is very see-through. I'm gonna use just a pin. So once I have my 20 inches measured, I'm gonna go up the length and I'm going to measure 27 inches. And again, since the edges of this lounger, I kind of want it to curve a little bit, I'm gonna give myself another 3 inches on the top just for leeway. So I'm going to be measuring to 30 inches. I'm just gonna place my pin to mark it. And then making sure that it's all flat, I'm gonna cut this out. So now I have the base measurement for the lounger. I'm just going to go ahead and take my sewing machine and sew along the side that is cut. So I only have to sew one side since the other side is folded. So now I have that one side sewn off, and I want the corners of the lounger to curve, but I want to make sure that the curve is the same on all 4 sides. So I'm going to take my tape measure and I'm going to measure 3 inches down and 3 inches across, and I'm going to be marking that space and making my curve within those markings, if that makes sense. So I know that each side has a 3-inch curve. So I'm just going to be taking, so I'm just gonna roughly mark where 3 inches lays on both sides. And I'm going to repeat that on all 4 sides. So now I have all 4 corners marked. I'm just gonna go ahead and along the top, I'm gonna start my sewing machine at that first marker, needle marker, and I'm going to make a curve and then sew it all the way across and then make a curve again and then end my sewing machine right there since this side is already sewn. So I'm gonna be closing off the top, and then on the bottom I'm gonna repeat the same process, except I wanna leave the length of this open so I could flip it inside out. So I'm gonna be sewing this curve and then stopping, sewing this curve and then stopping, and I'm gonna leave this open. So I'm just gonna go ahead and finish off these corners. So now I have all my curved edges sewn. I'm just going to cut away the excess fabric along the curves. Also, I just want to point out, I'm using a dark color thread just so it's easier for you guys to see, but feel free to use white or whatever color fabric you're using because it will blend in better. But anyway, now that I've cut all my corners, I'm just going to flip the lounger inside out. So now that my lounger is flipped, I'm going to begin measuring where I'm going to be sewing my lines. So I'm going to be sewing lines directly into the body of this so that I have specific tubes to fill. So we're going to have 3 lines sewn into this total. So my lounger, while after it's sewn, it's 21.5 inches. So I'm going to be marking it at 10.5. And then I'm going to measure up and make sure that this is about 5.5 inches away from the bottom. Now for the sides, I'm just going to measure along that marked piece, and I'm going to measure 5.5 inches along the side. Now I'm just going to make my way up the lounger, measuring 5.5 inches, just making sure that I am creating a line that is the same length long the entire way. So now I have a line marked that is 5.5 inches away from the corner. I'm just gonna go ahead and put these pins laying flat. So now I'm gonna go along the other side, measuring 5.5 inches away from the corners. Then I'm just gonna flip it over to the other side, and again I'm gonna do 5.5 inches upwards away from the top of the lounger. And I'm just gonna make sure that I am in the middle. So I'm measuring the exact middle and then making sure that pin is 5.5 inches away from the top. Then to make sure that the middle pins are even, I'm just taking the 2 pins, folding it, and then putting a few more pins. What the heck? My neighbors are so loud. So I'm just folding this in half and making sure that I'm placing pins along the center just so that when I'm sewing, I know that I'm going in a straight line. Okay, so now that I am done pinning, I'm going to begin sewing straight lines into the lounger. So since these seams are going to be visible, this is going to be the under portion of the lounger and there is going to be a cover on top of it, but since these seams will be visible, I'm just going to change the setting on my sewing machine to be a zigzag. So I'll make it a little bit cuter. I'm going to start at that first pin and then make my way straight down. So I finished my first line, and I'm just going to point out that I sewed onto the inside of the pins just because I didn't want to have to take them out as I was sewing, just because it kind of messes up the flow and I wanted my zigzag to be straight. So I'm just going to repeat that again for the middle row and the last row. And I just want to point out I'm beginning the 2 sides at the bottom portion of the pin, and then the middle row is going to go up a little bit higher than that, just so that when I fill it with stuffing, it will have a little bit more of an arc to it. So I finished sewing all 3 of my sides. I'm just going to take my pillow, cut it open, and begin stuffing just the outsides and the top. So when you're stuffing this, you're gonna wanna make sure that it's packed in pretty tightly. You don't want it to be too soft. I have the top and the sides almost completely stuffed. I just need to do the bottom. But first I'm gonna use a needle and thread, and I'm gonna sew up a little bit into this edging so I could fill it up easier. So I'm just gonna be flipping each side towards the inside so it has a little flap so that the raw edge is not facing outward. Now I have that together, I'm just gonna take a needle and thread and I'm just going to be sewing that on the outside. So now that I just have a little opening, I'm just gonna stuff the remainder and then sew up the rest of that side. So now I am finished making my baby lounger. It's pretty easy to do. As you can see, I just finished the seam line. You can see the seam line on the bottom, but that doesn't really matter. As far as making covers for this goes, I realized that this is about the size of a standard pillowcase. So I already tried it out. It fits perfectly with the pillowcase that comes in the sheet set that I bought to make this. So all I'm gonna do is just pick up some buttons at the craft store and sew some buttons along the bottom just to hold it in. And that's really all you have to do for covers. So yeah. So I hope you guys like this tutorial, and also I just want to say it, maybe it goes without saying, but this is just my disclaimer. I am not a professional company that has tested this for safety. I do not recommend to use this unsupervised. I don't recommend to use this as a co-sleeper. This is just my personal pattern, and I'm just sharing with you the pattern that I'm using. So please use your own discretion when you have your baby in a lounger. Any kind of lounger for that matter has safety and precautions that you really should take. So just take that into consideration, do your own research. This is just my pattern I thought I would share with you guys. But yeah, it is really cute, and it only cost me $20 to $30 depending on the fabric that you choose and the stuffing you choose. This is a very cheap and inexpensive DIY project. Considering that these baby loungers go for about $200, this was a really good project in my opinion. So yeah, I hope you guys like this tutorial. If you have any questions, leave them down below, and I will see you in my next video. So I just want to show you how it looks with the pillowcase cover on. So as you can see, it fits perfectly in the pillowcase. I'm just gonna add some buttons on the bottom to close it off. But yeah, this is super cute, super cheap, and super easy to make, so ta-da!